Hi again, Nicole here with some exercises on how to help you draw from observation or from real life. It can be really challenging to take something three-dimensional, which is sitting in front of you on the table, and draw it onto paper in two-dimensional form. A lot of my students get tripped up there. They get caught up in what their mind tells them it sees or thinks it should see versus what's really there in front of them. And if you watched my video on schematic imagery, it kind of gets you into what your brain does to you and how you can overthink it when you draw. A lot of my students get tripped up there. They get caught up in what their mind tells them it sees or thinks it should see versus what's really there in front of them. And if you watched my video on schematic imagery, it kind of gets you into what your brain does to you and how you can overthink it when you draw. But today I'm gonna teach you a couple exercises that will help you train your brain to actually draw what you see, not to draw what you think you see. So the first exercise is called blind continuous contour line drawing. First of all, contour lines are just outlines. So we're gonna draw the outline of an object, and it is continuous, meaning you do not lift your pen off of your paper, which teaches you to move your eyes at the same speed as your hand. So we have eye-hand coordination practice coming into play. And you're going to do it blind, not with a blindfold, but what that means is you're only going to look at the subject that you're trying to draw, and you're not going to look at your paper to see what your drawing looks like through the process. You're like probably thinking, yeah, right, that's crazy. Okay, it might sound crazy, and it ends up the results look a little funny. They don't look realistic necessarily, but that's not the point. The point is that you practice this hand-eye coordination, and you practice this concentrated observation, so you're drawing what you're actually seeing, not what your brain thinks it already looks like. So I'm going to do a demonstration on how this will look. Okay, so we're blind continuous contour line drawing. I'm going to use my non-drawing hand as my subject, and I like using a hand because it's pretty complex, which allows me to have some challenges, but also I can change the pose. It's pretty simple, and it's always attached to me. I can be anywhere and practice this continuous line drawing technique if I'm anywhere. But I would suggest if you're starting out, you start with a flat open palm or an open back of your hand, just to allow yourself to get familiar with the technique first before you start adjusting to more foreshortened hand gestures and such. So what you want to do is set yourself up so that you really aren't looking at your paper at the same time as your hand is right here. So to get this all in the screen, I kind of have to do this right here so you can see it, but I would actually put my subject way over on the other side of me and turn my body away, so I'm not trying to look at my paper. It's like an itch you can't scratch, right? We're so used to looking at our paper and checking to see how we're doing, but with this exercise, you don't want to. So just for demonstration's sake, I want to show you how you do this. You're gonna look, I typically start by looking at this side of my wrist or this side, and as my eyes move slowly, you're observing every single detail that you can. As my eyes move slowly around the contour edge of my hand, my pen is going to move at the same time. So it may look something like this. And I can add a little bit of some line work to accentuate maybe some creases or wrinkles. But notice I'm not lifting my pen off the paper, and you're unable to see my eyes at the moment, but I am keeping them locked on the outer contour of my hand. So I'm going around into the inside knuckle of my thumb, down to where I think my other crease in my thumb would be. Now you're going to get some fun results with this, right? Things are not going to line up exactly as they should. You might run off the paper. I'm kind of seeing I'm about to do that. I know I'm not supposed to be peeking, but I see it out of the peripheral vision anyway. And if you see that, it's not a big deal. Just, don't mark all over your desk or whatever. But you're going to have, in the end, a drawing that is not perfectly in proportion, right? The knuckles and the fingers and the palm of the hand, they're all going to look a little funky in comparison to one another because you're not able to check on your paper and see what it looks like. But I do want you to slow down to try to see as much of the curvature on the contour of your hand as you can, or whatever object it is you're drawing. And this allows your eyes and your hand to begin to coordinate with one another and work at the same pace. Okay, so there's an example of a blind contour hand drawing. If you do this exercise and your drawing looks something like this, you are not looking at your hand very closely. You're whizzing through it, you're drawing too fast, you aren't really looking at all of those little bends at the knuckles and creases in the skin and hangnails that might be there. I mean, really, really look and try to use your line work to give as much detail as possible. So there you have a blind, continuous contour line drawing. Now the next exercise is called a modified continuous contour line drawing. So again, it's a contour line drawing, so you're drawing the outside of an object. You're using a continuous line, so you're not lifting your pen or your pencil. And this time it's modified, which means you can look at both the paper that you're drawing on and the object at the same time. Or I guess you can't really do it at the same time, but you look at your object for the majority of the time. Let's say you'd start off with like 3 or 4 seconds of looking and drawing blind, and then you check your paper to see what your drawing's looking like. Alrighty, so now we're going to practice with a modified continuous contour line drawing. Very similar to the blind contour continuous line drawing, except you can now look at your paper and check. So this drawing exercise should actually take you longer because you're able to look just as slowly as the blind, but now you can check, which takes more time. So again, you can change your hand posture. I would suggest a flat hand or palm to start. I might do something a little bit more complex so you can see how that can be attempted. And sometimes you might want to even hold another object in your hand if you're starting to find that the contours of your hand are getting easier and easier. Add objects into your hand to add a little more complexity to it. So again, we start by slowly moving our eyes around the outer contour of the hand, or whatever object you're drawing. In this case, it's a hand. And we check. So every time you stop to check what your drawing looks like, I do suggest you stop moving your pen and then kind of make your next move. Come up, back in, take a look, and you can lift your pen for this exercise. Just be sure to put it back down where you left off so the line feels continuous. And this allows us to check proportion. I can stop and look visually. Since you can't see my eyes, I'm going to point to where I'm looking, but I'm looking from my knuckle to this knuckle, its length I have here on the paper. Do I like that? Yeah, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to come up a little higher. So I'm slowly, consciously making some choices as I'm looking back and forth from my paper to my hand. And now this is where you can really pay attention to proportions and where things line up, because you can check what your drawing looks like. So at the end of this angled line, I have a little bit of a bump here because it's indicating the knuckle, and I want to see where it lines up to this side. So I have a little bit more chance now to kind of adjust that, if you will. Now, again, it's a continuous line drawing and should look that way. So what you don't want to do is pick up your pen and go, I'm going to add some wrinkles in here. I mean, if you're truly trying to create the look of a continuous line drawing, those are nice and you can add them. Just know that you're not doing a continuous line drawing when you do that. And it's really not part of the practice. It's just detail that you can add once you've finished the practice of a modified continuous line drawing. So I'm going to continue on here. I'm trying to get my proportions a little bit more accurate. I really like to encourage my students to use a pen when they do this, because often we want to use a pencil eraser to fix our mistakes. However, you can make what I like to call beautiful mistakes or oopses in art. And I think you should just love them for what they are, honestly, and make them work for you. Now, this particular exercise, I tell students not to use an eraser because it's a crutch. As soon as someone who feels like they've made a mistake, even though they may not have, but in their head they think they might have, they erase something beautiful that they already had accomplished beautifully in their drawing. So I really encourage you not I'm concentrating. Sorry, I lost my not to erase. Now, there's my finished continuous. You can see I did use a couple of thinner lines to get from one place to the other. Probably, if I think of this like a puzzle, there was probably a better way to go about this to get all of the contour around without lifting my pen, but it's okay to use line quality to create different visuals. So a thin, fine line is going to be less noticeable on a drawing than a thick, bold line. So you can use the changing line qualities to intensify the lines that you would like your viewer to see. And again, it's just a practice. It doesn't really have to end up looking like a hand at all, but it's a good way to enhance your eye-hand coordination and to help your brain learn to draw what it sees, not what it thinks it sees. So I hope these exercises were helpful. Maybe you felt a little frustrated or very challenged, or maybe not at all. The great thing about this practice, though, is it can be adjusted per your skill level. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. So start off with just the simple hand drawings, drawing the thing that's attached to you and easiest to find, and just practice over and over and over again. When you start to feel like you're getting better and stronger at it, move forward. More complex hand gestures, new objects, but again, time, exercise. It's like, I don't know, have you ever played a musical instrument? Have you ever played a sport? How often do you practice to then perform? For instance, piano. Practice and practice and practice piano to have 1 or 2 recitals a year. Art is like that too. Your drawings, your large-scale drawings or your paintings, the ones that you want to put on the wall or you intend to have framed, those are your showcase pieces. If you don't practice elsewhere out of that, then you won't necessarily reach the goal of that final piece or that final project. So practice, 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 and you'll see over time that your skills will strengthen and drawing from life or observation will become easier and easier Thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon.